Hello, everybody. Welcome to Becoming Quantum Conscious, and this is Bart Sharp. And you are on United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network on 107.7 and 105.3, both FM. And out of the beautiful city of New Orleans, Louisiana. And also, you can see us on Roku, the UPRN Talk Radio website at .com, and you can also see us on Facebook, X, YouTube, and other internet platforms. It's all out there on this program of United Public Radio Network. I'm just kind of getting my last little details plugged in as now I'm ready to kind of talking without having to do two things at once. So it's really good to see everybody. Just having February here in Austin, and we actually have cold weather. And today we have one of the more daring Austinites with us. I have to say, a friend, a colleague, someone I find really amazing, Richard Massey. Hi, Richard.
Hey Bart, good to see you.
Yes, and this has been, I think this show has been in the planning for 2 years. And because
Yes.
what, not only is Richard a personal friend that I hang out with time to time, we're both involved in a community called Casa de Luz in Austin, Texas. If you're in Austin and you like vegetables, or you like the community of people that are motivated to eat vegetables, or vegetarians, vegans, and all of those cross eaters, which I am, uh, this is the place to go. And it has, with Richard, one of the most voracious appetites of consciousness I know of. Uh, but we're just going to talk about one slice of the pie tonight that he knows, which is family constellations. Um, and like I said, if you check Doc out, he will have lots of cool things to put out there with that. But we're just going to stay with this. Uh, so welcome to the show, Richard. It's nice to have you. I think I've already
Hey,
said
it's good
that.
to finally be here, Bart. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And family constellations. You've been leading family constellations groups for quite a while, haven't you?
hmm
Yeah.
Yes, I met Bert Hellinger back in 2002 at the NIH, and the phlebotomist in my IV clinic, it was her idea to go. I did not know who he was. And it was on family constellations and cancer. Was being filmed on C-SPAN. A lot of my holistic teachers were there as students that day, and it was quite the gathering.
Yeah, and when we talk about Bert Hellinger, he is one of the founders of Family Constellations. And
Yes.
this is, God, it's so abstract, it's so amazing, so complex, and may I say magical and transformative for people to let go of emotional patterns that they have developed not only with their immediate family, but throughout ancestry. It's that
hmm
big. And so,
Yes.
so yeah, can you just give us a brief there? And we just want to say hi to Learn Think Media, and glad you're here.
Oh yeah, that's our friend Rox that you met
Oh,
at
of
Constellations. Yes.
course. Hey, Rox. She's an amazing video
Yes.
artist
Yes, she is.
making movies and documentaries out there in the world.
Hmm.
And
Yes.
yeah, I just have to say that was a senior moment for me. I didn't catch that.
Yes.
So tell
Yes.
us
And
about family.
she's actually planning a big get together South by Southwest where we may actually do a constellation as part of a presentation. So we're going to
Whoa,
see if that gets accepted. Mhm.
I hope so. That'd be a good reason to go to South by Southwest. Which, if you do not know about this, this is a it's technology, movies, music, three separate, uh, I guess, what would you call conventions that spread all through the town on a 9 day period on spring break, mid March. So people come for one or all three. It'd be hard to imagine doing all three. But for us Austinites, either we jump into the stew and fully immerse ourselves into it, and or we stay at home and feel the excitement from afar. Uh, One of the two. But it takes
Yes.
over Austin for 9 days, and that's kind of exciting that you guys are going to do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It works out.
Yeah. So tell us about family constellations because this is such an abstract concept in general. So maybe we need to kind of spoon feed people on how it actually works with maybe just, what is the objective of it? What's it trying to do? And start from
Hmm.
there and
Okay.
go.
So let me share a couple of quick stories about what got me interested in staying with it. Um, this little device here is a heart biofeedback monitor, and it clips onto the ear, and it has a little light indicator that helps a person to tell the difference between my focus is where my thinking wants to go, and my focus is where my heart wants to go. And it helps me see the difference between those two things. So
Hmm.
one day, a woman brings in her 13-year-old daughter who has asthma that's getting worse. She's had it for 6 years. They're going to up her meds, and she's already having side effects. So I wasn't sure what to do with her, but I had that little M wave there, and I'd never used it this way before. But I clipped it on her earlobe, and this is a book that puts together German new medicine and constellations.
Can
It's
you tell
called
the
Recall
title?
Healing
Recall Healing.
by Dr. Jo. Recall Healing, the Pyramid of Health. It's worn out, Bart. I've used it a lot. And it's Jobert Renaud or Gilbert Renaud, as we might say it. He has YouTubes and also sells this book on his website. So I gave her the book and I actually bookmarked this page because this was such a big story in my life. So it has medical diagnoses in here. And this is the page that's about asthma. So I handed this book to this 13-year-old while her mother and I visited, and she's reading the conflicts for asthma. And all of a sudden, the little heart monitor makes a sound that her thinking is lined up with her heart. And so I ask her, "What did you just read in the book?" And she says, without any emotion, she goes, "Investigate the history of cheating in your family."
Wow.
Well, as soon as she read that, her mother burst into tears and ran out of the room. The little girl's asthma, as it turns out, had started when the mom started having an affair, which she thought was secret. But in the subconscious, there are no secrets in the family. Everyone's subconscious knows everything. And her little airways were spasming, trapping air in the middle. That's what asthma does. and it's saving air for whoever loses the argument between mom and dad. Now, what we did with that was we set up a small constellation, my partner and I. My partner stood in for her mom, I stood in for her dad, and I took her through the family constellation sentences of returning a conflict to the parents. She's carrying in her body, but it belongs to the parents. So I took her through those sentences. She wept and wept. We went over and we lovingly took that conflict from her symbolically. And her asthma, she left it there that day.
Wow, that's amazing.
A
You know,
very simple, basic. Mhm.
very simple and basic. And
Yes.
for those who never heard of this before, what type of sentences or what type of statements, if you could just give some basic examples, would you be saying to the child in that situation?
Yes. So I'll tell you a second one real quickly, and then we'll
All right.
go into that.
All right.
Um,
Sounds good.
because it turns out that the family tree, if I go like here for my great grandparents, grandparents, parents, then me, then my children, the heart blessings come through the family tree downhill like a
Mm-hmm.
flow of water. And if I see myself as the little one or my parents and see them as the big ones, the flow of blessing comes to me. But most of us, when we are in the womb, when our nervous system is forming, a lot of us, our parents are missing their own parents. So the little one takes on the energy of one of the grandparents out of love
Mm-hmm.
for mom or dad. And that means they see themselves as the big one. They
The
actually
character.
experience themselves having grandparent energy,
So
taking
they're,
care of the parents.
yes.
So they cannot receive the heart blessing, the ancestry in that position. They have to find their place, their true place on the family tree, right? So that's one of the things that happens in constellations is people take their rightful place. When that happens, there's a strength that comes through ancestors that's beyond anything I've ever seen in all of my years in medicine, which this is my 51st anniversary in healthcare. And I've not seen anything that strong for healing.
Mm. I have to agree that it's super amazing because it goes deep into the whole psyche of not only the person that you're working on, but everybody involved.
Yes.
So you
Yes.
said,
When we gather together in constellations, it's always a synchronicity rather than an accident who's there that night. And people get chosen to represent someone. They're going to get an insight about their own family conflict and a resolution, just standing in for someone's grandfather or grandmother or aunt or uncle.
yeah. And so, did you have another story, or should we progress
I
on to
did.
giving a basic idea of how this stuff works? So, because
Okay.
I think some of the people would really like to hear that.
Yes. So,
So
a
let's hear
second
this
quick
story.
story because, being a medical doctor, that was the way it got my attention was when physical illnesses cleared. Things that I was taught in pharmacy school and medical school, these are incurable. all we can do is control the symptoms. That's the highest we can aim for. Um, so a man in his mid 40s, a Mennonite farmer, comes in with his wife, and he's got this big abdominal tumor. It's starting to press on his lungs. It's so big, he's having a hard time breathing. And he came because I had a television show at that time in Odessa, Texas, on a Christian Jewish network. So it was a group of Christians who did all the Jewish festivals. Um, and they had seen me on the show and they came to see me. And I said, oh, I thought this is way over my head. You know, you need to be seeing somebody who's got a big clinic and doing all these things. And when we got into the story, the tumor began to grow after his last daughter left home. And then the wife looked at me and said, there was another daughter who was younger. And I said, really, what happened to her? She said she died about 10 hours after she was born. As soon as she mentioned that daughter, the man looked down at the ground and didn't look up again, which in constellations is a sign of guilt or death. And so I asked her about that. And she said, he really believes that it's because he didn't take care of me during the pregnancy. And that's why the baby died. And I asked her if that was true. And she said, no. So we did a little constellation where I knelt down in front of them as the little one. I said, I'm going to represent your daughter who died 10 hours after birth. I had the father stand behind my right shoulder, the mother stand behind my left shoulder, and I had them put an arm around each other because it turns out in constellations, when a child dies, usually the marriage is over. And what we want to do is have the parents hold each other and carry the grief together. And that restores the marriage. So they're standing behind me with an arm around each other, and I asked them to each put a hand on my head, and I took them through sentences that parents say in constellations to bless their children. So that blessing is going to come down to the little one. And Bart, they were heaving. I believe they call it keening, that kind of crying. That's a grief crying. And when we were done after a few minutes, I told him that's all I knew to do, and I wished them well. And he would call me every now and then, tell me how things were going. And in 30 days, this gigantic tumor was gone.
Wow.
I mean, it was just gone. He would call and say, my waist size just went down 2 more inches. What does that mean? I would say, I have no idea what that means. Um, and finally, after 30 days, it was gone. And they came back in 6 months later just to show me they were like a happy newlywed couple. It was just
Mhm.
amazing to see the glow in their marriage. Um, and so seeing things like that, oh, I thought there's really something about this, something very loving, very powerful, very embracing. And it's a good path. So if you have an inclination to check out the constellation path, I highly recommend it.
And constellations, from what I understand, it's almost like a very quiet creature that has been growing in this quiet way all around the world, or in a lot of countries.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of countries that are doing
Yes.
therapies of different kinds. Uh, there's family constellations in a lot of cities. You know, we are lucky
Mm-hmm.
enough to have a few in Austin. But my
Yes.
favorite, of course, is the one that you're a part of and the leader of, what I understand. But other people lead on other nights.
Hmm.
at Casa de Luz on Monday nights at 5:30.
Yes.
Uh,
It,
Serves a lot of people.
it's free to attend. It's free to represent. Yes. So people can
Yeah,
just come and see.
there's a certain generosity about it because it,
Yes.
everybody gets something from the experience, not only the person who receives.
Hmm. Yes.
So tell us a little bit about the
Yes.
dynamics. We've been talking for quite a while, and those who have no idea what family constellations is maybe need a little bit more of what the design is, you know.
Okay. Okay. So a couple of things. One you mentioned before we got started. This is Joy Monet's little booklet. People can get this on Amazon. It's very inexpensive. It's a beautiful introduction to how constellations work, very readable and understandable. The second thing I recommend is that people watch the drama series on Netflix called Another Self. It's a drama, 2 seasons long. It's about 3 Turkish women and the people in their lives, a doctor, a lawyer, and their friend. And it begins with the lawyer experiencing a physical healing of an abdominal cancer after a family constellation, similar to the story I just told you, and her doctor friend being furious and going to this little village to expose this quack because he's not practicing Western medicine. So it it starts out that way, but it's just beautiful to watch how the constellations work. Um, there will be little variations in how people do constellations, but the word itself means we shine together like stars.
Wow, we shine together like
So my
stars.
yes,
Juicy.
yes, and so my friend Dan Beaversdorf, who is a published astrologer and a family constellation facilitator, this was her take on it. That wherever we're coming from, we have this intelligence that we can shoot through a planetary constellation that's in a certain configuration in such a way that we're born into a physical family that has the exact constellation among the family members.
Mm.
Both of those are together, they're the same energy field.
And so it interacts with the whole family when you do a family constellation session. Am I getting you right on that? In
Mm-hmm.
other words, your
Mm-hmm.
siblings will also be part of that neurological phenomenon or
Yes.
astroneurological phenomenon because it goes beyond the
Yes.
body.
Yes.
It is an astral, uh, beyond the body concept.
Yes.
I mean, I think there's something magical, and you're probably better at explaining about if somebody wanted to do a family constellation, what would be kind of a general sequence of events that would happen uh, from kind of the start to the end.
Sure. So, and you can find online facilitators as well. The
Oh yeah.
idea is to have an introductory conversation to see if you match with the person or not. And the rule that I was taught in family constellations and in the German New Medicine recall healing world, we don't work with happy people. So if you're happy, go be happy. But if you have an issue that's really stopping you from moving forward in life, this is where we can help. And almost always it's an excluded person in your family system That's the number one that we want to do. We want to include everyone who belongs to the family system in the system. And we can do
Hmm.
that symbolically in a constellation. You can do it by drawing a family tree with a heart biofeedback monitor, and we can do it that way. But
Yeah.
everyone who belongs in the system, when they're included, my biology lines up with my heart. And when that happens, life is just easier.
Yeah.
There's just so much less friction as we go through life. You know, if
Yes.
my heart is here and my biology's going way over here all the time, it's just hard to
And
stay on track.
when you say your biology is going over there, it means that a lot of your energy is, and I call it an innate
Yes,
intelligence. It's like an inner power inside of you. If there's a if there's a big conflict in your family system or your family constellation, you'll always have energy going towards that to try to play your role of a dysfunctional role. Because it's
yes,
dysfunctional, it's not efficient, it's not working correctly. But when you bring it back into
yes,
alignment and the family back into alignment, all of a sudden your innate intelligence has more application that you can use in your own personal life.
yes, yes,
I'm always amazed by
yes.
it. And before we get to this next section, because I still want to get a basic explanation, we're already halfway through the show. And at this point, I want to let everybody know that um, you are listening to Richard Massey, and he is a part of the Family Constellations community in Austin, Texas, at Casa de Luz. We meet, and I'm a part of this group from time to time on Mondays at 5:30. It's a community of people that work this tool not only for their personal gain, but or their personal development, because people bring up their own constellations, but they do it as a community because it works on them as they role play these roles. So, Richard Massey, you can find him at Doc Massey, Massey, at gmail.com. Send him an email, he'll give you more information. If you want a session with him, that's how you do it. And also, my name is Bart Sharp, and you are on Becoming Quantum Conscious at United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 107.7 and 103.5, both FM out of New Orleans, Louisiana. And so let's just go through a journey about, like, particularly in this group that we work, because uh, I think it's kind of, the standard procedure of how group work is done with constellations work. Uh, you know, if I came to you with an issue saying, how would I do this? What would be the process?
So if you were here in Austin, basically I would send you a questionnaire, which anyone who's interested in that questionnaire, I can email it to you. And basically, I want to see what you want to do. That's really my part is listening. It turns out constellations is another way to listen. It's a listening to the family field rather than the individual story. So I want to get some information about the family field. Dietrich Klinghardt is an MD PhD. I took a lot of his classes. You can find his 5 levels of healing online. But family constellations, hypnosis, shamanic rituals are all up there in the level 4.
And
And
what's
they are
his
the
name again?
stories. Dietrich Klinghardt, Klinghardt.
Okay.
Um, and he's the one who first mentioned constellations in German New Medicine to me. And part of that questionnaire is going to be what happened during this time in your life. And we ask people to actually use real photos of themselves at birth and an infant photo if they have it. And if they have a mother or father who will walk them through this is when the neurological system actually forms. And it actually forms amazingly in a way that as it forms, it literally sucks the stress out of the parents. The stress that they're feeling during the pregnancy, the labor and delivery, and infancy, it literally sucks that stress into itself so that the parents have a better chance to make it. So it turns out my heart path is true, access to who I really am, but my nervous system love is not going the direction of my heart and the origin story. The nervous system love is backwards. It's trying to save my mommy and daddy the way they were between conception and 1 year old for me. So it's a love story, but it's a backwards love story. In constellations, that love story gets turned around so it faces forward and goes the same direction as my heart path.
Hmm.
So that's what we're up to. So, a couple of ways to do that. One, people can have a direct experience that changes everything, or we can have an honest mother who comes in and says, you were an unplanned conception, or I had an emergency C-section, and we begin to peel off those software programs in the nervous system that the person thought belonged to them, but really it is the origin story being played over and over and over. So, like the documentary Finding Joe, where the Buddhists discover that their Buddha is gold underneath all that mud. And the mud was put over to protect the gold from marauders centuries before everybody forgot that it was a golden Buddha until a piece of the mud fell off. So we pick off these pieces of mud, and sure enough, we're pure gold or quantum consciousness right here all the time, right? And when we get the nervous system program online with that, by honoring our parents, rather than trying to fix them or save them or balance them in some way, which is the innocent nervous system always trying to do that. Once we honor them in a different way, like in a family constellation ritual, the nervous system facing backwards has a chance to turn around, right? So
Yeah.
that's really what we're up to there.
And it is a ritual because
Yes.
from what I always see in the group, it's somebody has a family story that's uh, hasn't been resolved, and there's all of these different players of that story. Uh, for example, and nobody in the audience knows the story except for the
Right.
facilitator and the person experienced. And we are asked to play a part, like, and they won't tell you the role. They just say, will you participate? And they come over. And this is what I always find so magical with it. They touch you on the shoulder. And in my experience, something transfers into me. Uh, and I suddenly become that person energetically. And I start feeling things differently. And I'm tuning into that. And I play the role from what I feel in that reaction. And we start that process of playing those roles. And there might
Yes.
be 10, 15 people all playing roles, and we're different people. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's always amazes me. We are
It
part of the
does. Yeah, it amazes me too. Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yes. And so there's something when we gather together in that field, that field wants us to be free from whatever we're tangled in more than our own conscious desire wants that. It's an extremely powerful, loving field wanting to draw us forward into liberation from some tangle, right? And it
Yes.
conspires. It starts to conspire. It seems like before we even get there, that oh, this person's going to come. There, this person. It seems like there's a knowing there, and then we stand there and represent people, places, and events, and you can watch the person cry. And I don't even know why I'm standing on one leg, or I don't even know why I like this other person or don't like them, and they're just going, "Oh, that's just how Grandpa was," and I didn't even know I was Grandpa. And in that field, when we say sentences to people who represent family members, they have a deep and powerful effect to turn that nervous system program around. So when I tell Grandpa, "You're the perfect grandpa for Mom, and thank you for passing the gift of life forward to Mom," and we're just putting things in order, and then biology just starts lining up with reality, and
Yes.
everyone can feel it.
It is so true. I was there last week, and I was asked to play this role, and it was extremely sad. The person that was uh, the center or had the issue, I was face to face with him on my knees, and it was sadness upon sadness upon sadness. I thought, well,
Mm-hmm.
wow, I must be the child, and the mother must be extremely depressed. And I was kind of saying things in this context of like deep, deep sadness. But then, when the story is finally revealed at the end of the session,
Mm-hmm.
he is working generations back with his Mennonite great, great, great grandfather
Mm-hmm.
who was exiled out of the Ukraine by Russians and had to go to the United States. And it was similar to taking like a trail of tears that the Cherokee walked from
Yes.
eastern United States to Oklahoma. That was what came to me when I heard the story. It's like, oh, that's
Mm-hmm.
why the sadness. It just felt so much bigger than just what common depression was,
Yes.
and
Yes.
and I felt it. I mean, I couldn't explain it, but I held that for that person,
Yes.
uh, and of course, it gets resolved.
Yes, it does. It just comes out of the nervous system and goes back into the field where it gets transformed in some way. But now it no longer has a subconscious power over me to just whisper every time I go from place to place. Oh, remember how sad your great grandfather was when he got kicked out of his country. You're moving, and that sadness replays subconsciously over and over until it doesn't, until it gets released back out into the field and gets transformed. So that's a
Yeah.
beautiful service to help someone clear that subconscious sadness that's been with them their whole life since they were conceived, actually.
Yes. And Phyllis Mim says, so true about feeling differently as playing role. It's amazing how that works, but it does take over powerful, and it does take over
Mm-hmm.
us. And then when you do a session like, some of the ones we explained, to me, it's kind of like a trickle out, you know, like the trickle down economics, but this is a trickle out that you start to acclimate
Mm-hmm.
it all differently because this is all adjusting in your body.
Yes. Hellinger would encourage people to focus on the healing images and healing sentences at the end of a constellation. And as the person focused on it, their nervous system would literally rewire itself over the next 6 months to 2 years.
Hmm. And then it begins to teach the brain how to think differently and how to emote differently.
Yes,
But you feel
yes,
it in your body with that. And it's always amazing some of the sentences start to teach you how to show how you progress. And one of them that really gets me, as I read the book you were showing me on, gosh, why can't I think of her name? Miss Monet, uh, Family
hmm.
Constellations by Teresa Monet. Is that it?
Joy Monet
Joy
is
Monet.
joy. Hmm.
Joy Monet. Boy, that sounds beautiful.
Yeah,
So
it does.
one technique, I just love this. You visualize like your father standing behind you, and if you suddenly feel stronger and more empowered, that's a good thing. But if he's standing behind you and you feel these other sensations, you might have something to work on. Am I getting that right?
Yes,
That's how it works?
yes. And in some of those situations, what we do if a person feels weaker, we ask someone to represent father's father. And we go back in the lineage until somebody standing in that line feels strong. And
Ooh,
then that person begins to bless one by one everybody in the line until my father has the strength of his fathers. And then when he puts his hand on me, it has a completely different feel to it.
because it's the
There will be a
first time.
real event where the strength, yeah, where the strength of the fathers was broken. There will be a real event. And we
Yeah,
want to go back to that person, mhm, and let that person experience the healing of a strong father, passing it to him, then to him, then to him, then to him.
it might be the first time somebody's really felt their father be a
Yes,
whole individual, and thus the
yes,
sequence begins to grow from a new place.
yes, yes. Well said. I like that.
Yeah, and it's just amazing because we covered that up all of our lives and use a certain amount of our innate power to keep it repressed because we do not have an answer for it.
Right.
And this is so direct. In some ways, I don't know, there's a simplicity about it, but when you're doing it, uh, it's very complex and it's kind of a mystery that gets solved during the process.
Hmm.
So you've done this
Yes.
for many years, and I love to watch you work because it seems like you just know who to ask what they're feeling in that moment, because everybody that's playing a role is feeling a different part of this person's incomplete trauma or incomplete repressed story. There are different aspects of that
Hmm.
by being a brother or a sister or them as a child or, you know, parent 2 generations back.
Yes.
We're all playing a role and we're all feeling this stuff and watching each other, seeing our reactions to other people.
Hmm.
But you, as a facilitator, kind of direct that sequence, of knowing, well, what are you feeling right now, Johnny? The person that's
Hmm.
playing a role. How does that work for you? What have you developed in that? Because I've seen you change over the last couple of years. You seem a lot calmer,
Hmm.
you know, like like you're
Yes.
What does that,
Yeah.
can you give us any insight to what goes on in your mind when you're facilitating these things of like, how does that work?
Hmm. So I'm looking for where is the love story? I'm waiting for some clue as to where that might appear. Um, it's typically hidden at first. The first part of the constellation shows what the person inherited in the womb during labor and delivery and infancy. It's deeply subconscious. It's almost always backwards of what they thought their issue actually was. Like if they think their issue is with dad, it's usually with mom. If they think it's with mom, it's usually with dad. It's usually the flip. And so we watch for that. Where is the love story? What's out of order? And just watch for that. And my preference is when a constellation moves to completion all by itself without me doing anything. That's my preference. Um, my part is to step in if the constellation stops moving. So if people find themselves far apart in the room, nobody's connected with anyone, we got to either bring somebody in, do something, ask everybody how they are, and listen for clues of how to connect. Because the reality is, at the heart level, we're connected. And
Hmm.
if biology is not showing that, we want to bring that back into order because it actually longs to be back in order. It just doesn't know it yet. you know? So so we go and ask people, what are you feeling? What are you thinking? We'll add somebody in and see if that makes a difference and helps people complete a movement. If the
Hmm.
movement can't be completed, I would ask somebody to be little in front of the person representing their parent and say the child parent sentences and see how that goes. And then sometimes after that happens, all the other people in the constellation will just come in and find their right place. Once two or three people are in line, it has an effect on everybody. They go, oh, that's pretty good being in line. Um, we all feel different now, and we're going to all move over to our spot. And so when everybody feels that sense of connection,
Hmm.
that's a good thing for me. And I like seeing that.
Yeah. I was doing one where I was playing the role of the person with the constellation. Of course, I didn't know this. I felt like this guy who was a little bit bigger than life, that had an inflated ego, and he was like he was trying to be strong for everybody else. And there was these three
Mm.
young women that almost looked bratty to me, like children, and they were hiding on the side and they were playing. And I'm just irritated with you girls. And you know, and I was trying to be this fine, upstanding man, and of course, I never knew any of the story until I finally got to resolution with those girls. They turned out to be doctors who were uh, the same doctors that operated on the man's father when he was 11 years old, and the man died. So he saw them as irresponsible, and they were playing an irresponsible
Yes.
role. And he was trying to be, strong for the family because he didn't want to show the tears that he actually felt. So his ego was inflating him up to be the strong one.
Hmm.
And actually,
Yes.
so finally, I sunk into this place of littleness and humility. And that's what felt better uh,
Yes.
with that. Of course, without me knowing a single thing about what was happening, and the facilitator
Right.
directed all of these things to happen, and the people played the roles and they evolved. with the role that they
Hmm.
played. And slowly but surely, you know, what was really going on and what needed to evolve finally happened. It always just
Yes.
drops my jaw. Jaw, did I say that right? My jaw is always dropped.
Yeah.
Whew, what?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it's a compassion that it evolves slowly that way, uh, because the nervous system can be shocked if things happen too quickly. And the other thing that Hellinger observed is he often saw the solution very quickly before the people did, and he would just set up the solution. And he found that that had no effect on changing people's lives. They had to
Mm,
really see the entanglement long enough to deeply feel it. And then
wow.
the solution appears. If they don't feel that, the nervous system doesn't buy it as authentic.
So yours isn't, your job is not to try to figure it out, but to be in the
Right?
experience with everybody else
Yes.
and use your own intuition to see, maybe to facilitate it coming out more for other people. They have to find it.
Yes. Yes.
It sounds like you're walking in the dark a little bit, and it's the same way. I have never seen a constellation not find its own light.
Right.
It's jaw dropping.
It's it's rare that that happens, and when it does, those actually end up having a very powerful effect on a person, because not having a resolution creates such an angst that people are motivated to do more and dig in deeper. Um, so even though it's not satisfying in the moment, um, it ends up having a good result.
Well,
The
it makes
person stays with it.
that makes perfect sense because you're an adult and all the nervous system is brought up, stimulated towards in present tense, not past tense, and it's in conflict. And you're an adult, so you have more tools to be able to deal with it and to work
Mhm.
with it if you're so willing, as opposed to a child that does not have any of those tools.
Yes,
So
yes, and the yeah, yeah, I
yeah.
agree. In the child's nervous system, that I think responsible indigenous cultures reprogram the child nervous system at puberty, because they realize that the child's nervous system is hopelessly trying to save mommy and daddy and grandma and grandpa. And unless they have help turning that love story around to the present moment, they'll spend their entire life trying to save mommy and daddy, grandma and grandpa, whoever else in the
Mhm.
family. So they get together and do a village initiation. I've seen some of those. I've been in a couple, um, and I've heard about them. And I believe it was Alberto Vioto, not sure, in Central America. They drop them in a hole for 3 days and nights with no food or water. They drum and sing for them, tell them, we hope you have a conversation with your true self, because all your perceptions are looking backwards. Uh, and then they would pull them out of that hole after 3 days, and the village parents switched children. So the children would go live with different parents from 13 on, because if they went back to the same parents, the original backward story would get reinforced again.
Mm,
So that's how powerful that origin program is, to keep the nervous system locked in a backwards love story. It's pure love, but it's backwards. And so
yeah.
when people get married, what happens is there's a sort of a secret battle, like, my family in the past is worth more love than your family in the past. And, neither one of us know how to turn this around and create something new. it's a battle over loyalties. I'm more loyal to my family than you are, or whatever. And it's a source
It,
of a lot of conflict that
it,
Hellinger would see.
it is, and it's a great lesson for everybody in the world to see that, but also to see how we're reacting to this unresolved love story. We create more
Hmm.
conflict, we act it out with other
Yes.
people, we go into addictions, we go into high stimulation activities
Hmm.
that take us away from
Yes.
feeling ourselves. All of these are common strategies that we
Hmm.
see in the world. And, you know, that's why these type of communities like you have at Casa de Luz are so cool, because people can come in and start this process. And whether your story is brought up or it's somebody else's story, it starts to integrate your nervous system to something of a
Hmm.
higher state, or of a resolved and calmer state, so that you can go higher. It's just totally amazing. And if you tuned in later, we haven't said this in a while. We're talking about family constellations. Uh, Richard Massey, who is our guest, is a expert and facilitator of family constellations. They're all over the world. You can find them uh, just getting on the internet, and you'll find your way to one. Amazing stuff. And we're coming to the end of the show. So, Richard, as a kind of an ending, this is tradition, is can you just share one tidbit of wisdom that you would like to impart with everybody? We're coming down to the last couple of minutes, so we got about 1 minute. And while you think about that, I want to tell everybody that you're listening to Richard Massey with Family Constellations, and this show is Becoming Quantum Conscious. My name is Bart Sharp, and you are in United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 107.7 and 105.3 FM out of New Orleans. And you can find us on the uprntalkradio.com website, but also on Roku, Facebook, YouTube, X, and other internet platforms. Next week, we will have Marika Alvarado with American Indian medicine uh, tools and techniques and healing. It's going to be fun. So, Richard, what party wisdom do you have for us?
So, three things I think I've learned in 75 years, Bart, from my own observations and not from opinions. You can see my microscope in the back there. Um, I've been looking at blood for 26 years. So far, every single human that's come in is healing all the time.
Mm,
Everyone's body is healing all the time. There's no such thing as sickness the way I was taught it in pharmacy school and medical school. That's a very narrow, factually correct perspective, but the bigger perspective is we're all healing. People love watching that. Their heart goes into high coherence when they see it. I would encourage all the listeners to find a way to experience that, to be heart biofeedback monitored and watch your own blood heal right in front of your eyes. It's a life changing experience. The second thing is the nervous system in my body was not originally programmed to serve me. It was programmed to serve my parents and grandparents, how they were between conception and 1 year old. And this nervous system will not serve me unless something happens to turn that love around into the present moment. Constellations is one way to do that. It's been a reliable path. And so I would encourage everyone who's having any friction in their life with money, relationships, happiness, to check out the constellation path. Thanks for having me as your guest today.
thank you so much, Richard, and great show. And we'll see everybody next week. But it's time to leave right now. Bye bye, everybody.